we're in a weird time for live music. We're in a weird time for, it's almost a little bit of a code red situation, man.
Good code red.
There's a battle between the club and the artist right now. And it's, I don't know where it's going to kind of go from here because the club wants you to do everything.
OMG.
The club wants you to do everything, and then they'll cancel you. They'll cancel you in a heart, as somebody on this that's next to me just found out.
Right.
It's at a moment's notice, you've booked, scheduled rehearsals, done charts, maybe even rehearsed, maybe got some people. This is kind of where we are, and it's a tricky place to be. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I definitely agree, because not only is the performing watered down, the listening is watered down. People come in, they'll talk about during things, they'll clap for everything, and I'm like, everything is great, everything is phenomenal, everything is like the best thing we've ever heard. And I'm like, are you listening to the same thing I'm listening? How's your listening?
Yeah.
How's your listening? If everything's watered down and everything is exceptional, then nothing's exceptional.
Mm-hmm.
But when people hear the real deal, they're like, whoa, what is that?
Mm-hmm. So I witnessed something last week. I was off from my normal Wednesday gig, so I was fortunate enough to get a call from my brother Robert Boone to sub for him over at the Red Light Cafe.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a session that has been going. Well, I mean, actually, we may have
pre-pandemic.
The pre-pandemic run by our great friend and mentor, Gordon Vernick. We're going to bring Gordon on shortly, and we're going to talk about a few things. But I hadn't been there because I've been playing Wednesday night for over about a year and a half with the Mike Veal band, and so I was thinking about this, like, what are some unusual phenomenon? So I'm going to have our great producer going to bring up a couple of things, and we're going to talk about some unusual phenomenons here, right? There may be there's one thing that could happen in certain parts of the world and it doesn't happen anywhere else, and nobody can explain it. That's basically what an unusual phenomenon is, right? So we have here's another thing in the Gulf of, what is this? Carpentera, Queensland, Australia. We have this weird cloud-like formation. Just kind of looks like cotton or something, man. Like it happens. These things, it happens once a year. Here you got Sailing Stones, Death Valley, California. Like, these are what we call unusual phenomenons, right?
Right.
So I get to Red Light Cafe last week, and I'm seeing people pile in to this place. Not only people, but young people. And you guys tried to warn me, right? You tried to warn me. You're like, dude, you're not going to believe it. I was like, okay, So I'm trying to we getting started and stuff. And I'm distracted. I'm like, I can't concentrate because we've got young couples coming in for date night. We've got people coming in that have pre-bought tickets for the evening to get a seat to watch. And we're talking about, these are all under 30 people. This is there's no 60 and over here,
And you're mentioning only one phenomenon.
Okay.
The other phenomenon is the seriousness of the music.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that.
You have unusual phenomenon.
Yeah.
If it's singular, but there's
No,
couple of different ones going on.
It's no, that's there's a few different ones,
right,
and people are coming in. They're at capacity now. I later found out that there's usually a line out the door. There's usually people waiting, but they were still at capacity for the club at red light. So I go home and they have a live stream. Imagine that. I'm like, man, this looks great. What kind of camera they got? Man, the cat's got an iPhone. Shout out to Michael Chamberlain, man, for hanging in there and saying, you know what? We don't care if there's 5 people here or 500 people. This is going to, at some point, something's going to happen. So listen, without further ado, we're going to bring in the leader of, by far, the top session in Atlanta.
Might as well say it.
Our brother, Gordon Vernick. What's going on, GV?
It's so nice to be here with my dear friends Chris and Big T. You know, it's just wonderful, and to hear those kind words you're saying about this session that we've been running at the red light. This has been going on for about 10 years, and 10 years ago, if we had 25 people in there, we were doing pretty good. And I didn't pay myself; I was just paying the musicians so they would, let everybody get a little taste. I'm a full-time employee of Georgia State, so for me, it's a labor of love. But I can barely believe it every Wednesday night when we play there, the amount of people that are coming in and the demographic of the people that are coming in. It's black, it's white, it's Asian, it's mostly young, kind of hipsterish. But there's some reasons for this, and it's just because we've been at it for so long, and we just wouldn't give up. The streaming, obviously, pandemic was a low point, and I asked all the guys in the band at that point. It was Delbert, Felix, and Kevin, and I believe Che Marshall was playing. Marlon Patton was also part of that mix, and we said, "Do we want to play or do we want to not play?" And everybody said, "We want to play." So we started playing. It was not a soul in there. It was really weird, and we would stream it. This started in probably March of 20. And it went on that way until they let people come in, which was maybe 6 or 7 months later, and slowly. And it was up and down. And the bands were great. I was using great musicians. It was Ty. It was Kevin Bales, Louis Harivo, or whoever was available. Neil Starkey, Craig Shaw, Delbert, and it was always a wonderful mix of musicians. And it was therapeutic for us.
Yeah.
And then I would say about 18 months ago, something started to happen, and I can't quite put my finger on it. All of a sudden, people are showing up, and these are not people my age. It was a demographic that was showing up that was between 20 and say 30 years old. But they realize that there's something very special happening when there's magic on the stage. Whether it's Ty or Kevin or Robert or you, Chris, last week, we had some magic moments. The people, they shut up and they're like entranced because they know that this is very special. They don't understand chord progressions, the songs, but when magic happens, people realize that and they pay attention. And then, of course, great musicians start to show up. I think it was 2 weeks ago, we had 4 or 5 of some of the finest saxophone players I've ever heard on the stage. Drummers that were just killing it. Keyboard players, bass players, trumpet players. And I tried to keep a very high level. Like a lot of young musicians will come in and say, I want to play. And so I got to ask them 50 questions. Some songs, where do you go to school, who you're studying with? Because what the last thing I want is for someone to come up and have a negative experience and just kind of bring the whole level down. It's not an open mic. Last week, a young woman and her, I think her boyfriend came in and they asked if it was open mic night. And I said, no, this is not an open mic. This is a jam session where people get up and we expect a certain level of expertise. I said, check out what we're doing. If you think you want to get up on the stage, you're more than welcome. And of course, they were like, I don't think so. that we started streaming before other places. Nobody else was doing this. And Michael said, we need to do this. And we just kept at it. And I was like, whatever you think is proper, go ahead and do it. I don't really care. For me, Wednesday night is a therapy night. And I try to keep the musicians. I hire the guys who are, I have incredible respect for. They're very creative people, and I never ever tell anybody what to do or how to play. And that's what I let guys go. Ty comes in and brings his thing. Bales brings his thing. KB Jr. brings his thing. Louis Harivo, whoever comes in and plays, I let them bring their thing. And the drummers, Boone is amazing. You're amazing. And bass players, Neil Starkey, who's, my God, he's just a legend. But I let the musicians establish what they want to play and how they want to play, and I go along with it. And then when it's time for me to step down, and I bring up other musicians and hopefully let the magic create itself. Whether it's Tia Ricks or Rita Graham or Audrey Shakir or Lava High or who's the other wonderful young singer who comes in occasionally, Melody Fort. I try to keep that level high. So if the audience, they don't, they're not, the most jazz savvy people, on the planet, but they know when things are working, when they're not. And when they're not, I can just see it. And I'm like, we need to make a change, get some other musicians up here. It's very organic. And what I think is that kids tell the audience there, they tell their friends. A lot of it is word of mouth. A lot of it is TikTok. A lot of it is Instagram, Facebook. And of course, there's other platforms, and the streaming also really helps. I have friends that can't be there, and they tell me, I saw the session last night. I have friends in Europe and Asia, South Africa, and they watch the sessions. So we have a nice international and national following just from people who are watching.
Doc, let me ask you a question. You've had many guest artists come, serious musicians that come from out of town. Like Marshall Gilks was the last one I was there. What do they say about it when they get there?
They're amazed. I always, I build into an artist's schedule. I say, we're going to go to the Red Light Cafe. They're like, what is that? It's a little session that I run every Wednesday night. And they're usually like, well, I don't think I want to do that. And then once they hear the rhythm section playing, they're like, yeah, get the horn out. I've had, Marshall Gilks. I've had, Randy Brecker, H.N. Charles, Kenny Werner, Paquito de Rivera, Randy Brecker. I mean, just unbelievable keyboard players, drummers. I brought Jeff Tane Watson. Tane stayed the whole night and played and had a ball.
But that's what we want. We want it's a reciprocal thing, because we love those great national artists come in, but we also want to show them, hey, we got a little something happening here too. We want y'all to know, So
one of the nicest comments I got from a world-class artist, he said, your rhythm section's really effing good. These guys can play.
Right.
And he said to me, and it was a wonderful comment. I said, and you talk the talk, but you can walk the walk, and that's very important as a person who is a jazz educator, because we lead by example. So for me, that was an incredible compliment. And jazz music is always a trial by fire.
Right.
It's always been a very kind of a physical, gladiatorial kind of music. And music is whether it's orchestral or jazz or rock or pop, but jazz especially, because of the jam session and the history of the cutting contest going back to Kansas City and Chicago. It's like either you can play or you can't. I remember my dad was a professional musician in New York City, and he would always say, either you can play or you can't. We have Ty. We got some young colleagues. A couple of weeks ago, Ty was there, and you had all your young pianists from Kennesaw, and you were sitting right next to him, and you were like, don't do that. But I was watching that, and those kids responded, and they sounded great. So that's the future. So Blake Dwelly came in last week, young. I think he's just finished his freshman year at FSU. Went through our RIJO, or jazz program at Georgia State for high school kids, and he's killing it. He sounded wonderful.
Tyrone and I always talk about you're going to have to, what you really are there for, and the only place you're going to really learn is on the bandstand. That's where you're going to learn the most. The practice room is one thing, but what you apply on the bandstand,
well, you can't get everything in a 50-minute lesson.
You can't.
No.
But it's the same thing at the session. How are you going to know what is competing rhythms if you don't talk to the drummer? You know,
right.
I don't have enough time in the day to give you that. I'm still trying to work on voicings and stuff. I'm trying to work on 2-5-1s.
And that's not your job.
To a drummer, I say, why don't you play like your hair is on fire? And then you're looking for a bucket of water, and you stick your head in a can of gasoline. And how would you be playing then? You'd be playing with a lot of energy because you'd be looking for a bucket of water.
Yeah.
But
right.
obviously, you took the time to speak with Blake, and most young musicians they're looking for that information. And I've never had a student or someone there who was not receptive, and they always say, well, what did you think? And I'll say, I said, I'm a teacher, so I'll say, you really want my honest opinion, or do you want me just to say that you played great? And most of the time they say, I need help. And I'll say, well, you need to be working on this, transcribing this, listening to this, working on these exercises, learning these songs, listening to these recordings, learning these tunes. And then hopefully they'll come back in 2 or 3 weeks and say, I learned that tune and I learned so-and-so solo on it, and I'm going to play that solo tonight on that tune. I was like, okay, very good. Now, what did you learn from that? Can you extract some ideas that you can turn into your own language? That turns into a whole other thing.
Turn around.
I can't believe it, man. I mean, I'm still a little bit in awe. I was in shock for 2 days. I was just like,
so we told you. We told you.
I know you told me, but you
weren't ready for it. And the Chamberlains being willing to support what we did. Now, Ellen's father is a great supporter. He's an older fella, and he saw the keyboard players having to drag in keyboards, and it was kind of a pain. And he went out and he bought 2 really, really good keyboards, so that when Ty or whoever it is shows up, there's a good instrument set up with a good sound system. There's a bass amp there. There's a guitar amp. The only person who has to bring in anything is the drummer. So I wanted to make it so that it was more user friendly, because people are always like, so I got to bring a keyboard. It's like, and the keyboard's not an acoustic piano, but if you have a decent keyboard, it mitigates the fact that there's not a Steinway, grand piano there, which is never going to happen in a place like that.
They're charging something. It's not free.
Yeah, there's value added to that.
So that's, $10. Man,
it's nothing.
And people are paying they're buying tickets ahead of time, man. I was listening. That was another, I was thrown off because the woman has these who's bought tickets ahead of time, and it's organized and people are there to get a seat. I'm like,
you couldn't even play, bro.
I couldn't, man.
I was like, everything.
But I'm always watching the door to see who's coming in. Have I seen these people before? If I haven't seen them, I always make it my job to say, hey, how you doing? How'd you find out about this place? I'm so glad that you're here. And that's an important part of the experience, because now I got kids who come and they say, hey, Doc, man, how you doing? We were here last week. I brought my brother, my parents are here. It turned into this whole vibe. And I can be abrasive if anything, but I look at these people that are coming here. I was like, how'd you find out about this place? Did you enjoy the music? Make sure you tell your friends about it. And so I'm very curious. And Michael and Ellen and I talk about this all the time, and we just can't quite figure it out. But we say, let's leave it alone, because eventually it'll probably run its course, like all wonderful things will. But we put in the time, and we're reaping the rewards of just staying with it and keeping the level of music high, and just bringing in, like, I hire the best musicians that we can possibly find in the city, and keep the music at a very high level. And sometimes, people say, well, you're not being inclusive. I said, if you're not ready to hang with the big dogs, then just sit there and listen.
You ever felt the pressure to change that rule or bend that rule because of before it was getting packed? Like you never had the pressure. You never like, okay.
No. And I've gotten some Yelp reviews say, Gordon Vernick is bad. I got a couple that I won't share. I can share with you off
Not
camera.
the Yelp,
That,
bro. Not
that
the
were
Yelp. Yelp got
that
you.
were just horrendous. But I have students. They do this thing called Rate Your Professor, and I've been ripped and raked over the coals. And I always tell students who never, the first time in their class, I say, you check out Rate Your Professor, and they kind of go like this. They raise their hand. I go, whatever you've seen in there is true. So you can drop the class right now.
On Wednesday, I was, after I played a few tunes, I was walking to the back of the club, and somebody, young kid stopped me, and he said, hey man, I just want to let you know that I just learned so much, man, by watching you right now. I just learned so much. And I was like, where am I again? Where am I right now? Like, so I said, oh, well, thanks, man. I said, you drummer, obviously the drummer. He's like, oh yeah, man. It's like, I play around town and playing a couple different bands and da 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 da. I was like, oh, so of course I'm like, oh man, you gonna sit in? He goes, no way.
No way.
He's like,
So
nah.
one of the nicest things is a surprise. There was a young kid he was very, very soft spoken. He says, I play the drums and I would like to play. And so I get this all the time. And I go, what's your name? He says, Kevin. So I forgot about him. And then finally around 11 o'clock, he said, I'd like to play. I said, where are you from? He's from San Juan. And the kid sat down and I don't know if you heard, he was killing it.
Yeah.
And I said, you make sure you come back next week. He came back last week and he was
great kid, man. Yeah.
He was killing it again. And he went back to San Juan. I said, are you thinking about going to school? He says, I'm going to school somewhere in Switzerland. I said, that's kind of expensive. I said, you can come to Georgia State University. So it's also a way for recruiting. And so I said, you played really well. So it's also an opportunity to say that Atlanta has a lot to offer Georgia State. And then, of course, Kennesaw has a lot to offer. You can go study with Gary Motley over at Emory. And Gary comes in occasionally, and he doesn't come out very often to sessions. And he was here a couple of weeks ago and just murdered it in a very musical way.
So we were doing a session over Educator at a place called the Apple House, which was
right down the street from Sam's Place, Bird and Brew.
Yeah, right there where Community Barbecue is. It's pretty much right next door. Sam, he was, he had started to curate this thing, and we got that thing cooking. And it was all just a similar situation. All the cats that were not coming out were now coming out, and they were like, oh man, this is cool. Okay. That was the last time that I felt that type of experience at a jam. I felt like we had that at Twain's a little bit,
Oh yeah. Twain's was fantastic.
Is the relationship between the artist and the venue, man, is super, super important that you both in this together. And this is, again, what has happened at the Red Light is you guys are in this together. It's not, why aren't you bringing Pete? Well, last week was busier than this week. What's going on? It's
no, we have a wonderful, as like a family relationship. And because of my relationship with the Chamberlains, because they took a chance, because they weren't doing great. And Wednesday nights have turned into a huge money night for them. And because of that, there have been spin-offs. We've been doing recitals there with some of my students. Ty, you got something going on there. Vinny D'Agostino does stuff. So some other nights of the week could be a Sunday or a Monday or a Thursday or a Friday. There's other jazz events in addition to all the singer-songwriter, comedy, magic, burlesque, whatever they happen to be doing there. So my relationship with them, we're friends, but they're running a business, and I'm trying to help them, but they also understand the value they and appreciate the value. And that's the thing. That's why I always like working for Sam Yee. He appreciates the value. He's not just some guy who's just trying to get people in there to make a buck. They understand, like when we have a set, and the band is killing it, and there's magic on the stand. I'll be, getting a drink at the bar or something, and he'll look over and he said, that was magic. What just happened on that bandstand was amazing. Um, but this is very organic, and I think that's the best way. People are inundated with emails, and Facebook is no longer very effective. I think Instagram is maybe a little more effective. Then TikTok has been very helpful because people are sending snippets and they're posting those things.
Right.
And I just do what I can do, and I just leave it. Like when I tag Ty, he'll tag some other people, or let's say you need to check this out. But we have now there's a reputation. People know that if you want to come and hear some good music at a high level, and if you're interested in sitting in it, and so we're getting musicians from all over the country, actually all over the world, who are, if they're in town on a Wednesday after they play a show at the Fox or some other place, they come to the
Red Light Cafe.
And they just say, I just did a show, so and so. I say, hey man, you got your horn? Yeah, man. You want to play? Absolutely. So they hear a couple of tunes. I say, come on, let's do this. I heard an alto player who came up from Florida. He was a friend of a friend of a friend. He came in. He heard about the session, and this guy was killing it. So I kept him up there for at least 3 or 4 tunes.
So Doc, there's something that Takana mentioned when she came out. So this is what she said to me. I wasn't playing. I can't remember who was playing. Maybe Kevin was up there playing. And she leans over to me. She says, Doc sounds wonderful. She's like, I don't remember him sounding like this when I was in school. So part of the session, I watch you, and it's really cool to see you get to experimental mode and go. I know that your guys like Bix Beiderbecke and, Blue Mitchell and all those kind of guys, but you have now crossed over into the other realm, into the creativity of like a Kenny Banks Jr. and all, and Kevin Bales when he reharmonizes on the spot, and myself. You have gotten up a couple of notches too. What kind of aspect is that for you as far as playing?
That's funny you should mention that. As musicians, we kind of get caught into habits. We play certain kind of songs a certain way, but when you surround yourself with musicians who constantly push you, like you'll reharmonize something. It's like, oh, I didn't expect that to happen, or I'll say, Ty, set this up, and then you'll reharmonize the song completely, and that forces me out of my old habits into new creative habits, I would say. Right. Bales is really good at doing that. Kenny Banks Jr. you never know what he's going to do. So people say, well, I don't like to play with pianists because I don't know what they're going to do. Then my answer to them is like, what's wrong with you? This music should always push you into, you're gonna fall on your face, you're gonna miss a chord change, but it forces you to out of your comfort zone.
Right, that's right.
And that's a problem that a lot of musicians have. They stay there. Like, I love Blue Mitchell, but when you do certain things, it's like, I need to be more in a kind of a Tom Harrell, the more a more modern kind of a language, and that's true. My playing, and I'm not going to lie, has improved.
Mine too.
In terms of harmony and melody, and I've been writing compositions, and I just never did that. Like in the early '90s, I was kind of in this club date mode where you just play the song and you play play an A section, and then maybe occasionally you play a jazz gig. But now I don't do those kinds of gigs anymore. I only play jazz gigs, and even if I'm playing with a duo or a trio, we're playing like kind of background music. We're not playing for the audience so much as we're playing for ourselves. So if you and I are doing something and you go off, it's like, I'm right there with you. I am not going to be,
and we're doing your tunes too. We're doing your originals, Destination, all of those tracks, man. It's really cool that you could I mean, you write those tunes, but you want to express it, right? You want to play it. Right. When do you get a chance to play it? You know?
Yeah, you have to have your own situation where you can do your own material. So I always try to do maybe one or two original or just kind of unusual pieces that get me out of my comfort zone. It also changes the way I practice and what I practice.
Right.
So it's affected everything about my routine, because if you practice the same things the same way every day, you're caught in a kind of what they call like a hamster wheel, and you want to be able to get off that wheel and experiment and listen to other people doing things. So that's why I like playing with these wonderful keyboard players, and then of course Neil catches it, and then you're playing with a drummer like Chris or Adam Henley or Boone. Or when Marlon Patton was there, I got to play with Marlon last week at Lincoln Center, and those guys, man, they catch everything. Nothing gets by them, and so you can't be asleep for a second. And it's not exhausting, but it's exhilarating.
It is.
Yeah,
to be in that situation.
And it gives you something to work towards. The biggest lesson from take away from this is kind of like what we're trying to do with this show. It's like, yeah, we may only have 5 people or 1 person at sometimes, or we'll have, but if you believe in something, you just you have to stick with it. You
have to stay with it.
I mean, there's a lot that's coming out.
Yeah, there's a lot of different levels of things that are happening there, and one of the nicest things is when I hear like students or former students. I think of everybody as my kids, and when I hear them, like they're like, I didn't hear that last week, I didn't hear that a month ago, and all of a sudden I hear something coming out of someone's horn. I was like, that's good. One of the funniest things, and it's just really telling. Years ago, I played a concert with Joe Granston at a nice venue, and a guy came up to me and he said, "Do you still play better than Joe?" And I said, "If I played better than Joe, which I don't," I said, "then I would be a very bad teacher." I said, no, he plays way better than me. And that's the goal of every teacher, is to have their students, go way beyond what you have shown them, so they can develop a language and a style of their own, and can keep on developing as musicians. And so when I hear kids, it's like, they're like, all of a sudden it's like, Yep, I hear that. That's fantastic. And I'm very, trumpet players are very competitive. I'll get out of the bandstand with anybody and try to, one up them. But that's trumpet playing. But it is such a thrill for me, and that's a legacy that long after we're gone, those people will still be playing their instruments.
Yeah, I had a former student of mine, and you also well know, went to Georgia State, Xavier Gordon, and I went to see him with Marcus Miller, right? He got me a ticket, $100 ticket. The parking was like $25. He wanted me in the building, right? He's like, "Hey man, I just want you to see, what I've learned from you stuff." And he did that gig. And after it was over with, you know what I told him, Doc? I said, "There's no way I could do this gig." I said, "I'm so proud of you right now, what you have accomplished and what you continue to accomplish." I said, "Nothing brings me more joy as a teacher to see you doing this."
Absolutely.
Doing something I can't do. I played with Marcus Miller. I was like, "Oh, I can't do this gig." You know what I'm saying? I can't. So it was really good. And you know how Xavier was just a great student. He was a wonderful student. My master, yeah.
Yeah, and he came to me, and he had a lot of skills, growing up, learning how to play in the church, and the jazz language kind of came to him secondarily, but he worked hard, and he also developed as a wonderful vocalist. I had no idea he was a really talented vocalist.
Right.
Yeah, Gordon. Well, thank you we're going to kind of wrap it there with you, and just want the
red light tomorrow.
Let's see, it's Joel Powell. Neil's out of town, so Joel is playing, Boone and Bales. So if you guys are free, well, no one is ever free. That's kind of a rhetorical statement. But please come by and hang out with us, because it's turned into a family affair. If that's as corny as that sounds, I see my these young musicians or colleagues. It's just like family. It's like, I'm so happy to see you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, guys, get over to Red Light, and you probably got to buy tickets in advance. Letting you know now. Get over there. The session is from 9 to 11:30 ish, midnight-ish. Yeah. And you know, it's a great experience. There's you know, great drinks and just you know, a lot to take in there in terms of just hanging out with cool people and being around great music. And but if you want to get a seat, buy a ticket in advance. I'm telling you right now. Definitely.
Come on out, get a piece.
Well, I want to thank you guys for giving me an opportunity to pontificate again. And I hope to see you really soon, sooner than later. And you all take care now.
Okay,
Thanks,
Gordon.
Todd.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it, man.
All right.
Thanks. All right.
Yeah, man.
Man, I'm still in shock, man.
I know you are, bro. Me and Doc was like, we tried to tell you. As soon as you got on there, I just stared at you the whole time we was playing.